Everybody, welcome back to Typical City. Manchester United fans, strap yourselves in. This is going to be a bit of a bumpy ride, I'm afraid, because Stefan Borson has blown the lid off. Premier League corruption, Manchester United corruption, cheating is what we're talking about here. The potential circumventing of rules, PSR rules, financial fair play is the old term that most people are familiar with, but now we've all gotten on board with PSR. It's starting to look a little bit fishy if you are a Manchester United fan, and how much the Premier League favour certain clubs over other clubs, and questions need to be asked and answered by the Premier League with some of the most potential disgusting practices I've ever seen. So what Stefan Borson is exposing here is the fact that he's researched in the numbers. And before I go any further, please go and give Stefan Borson, he's a legend. If you don't know him, he's a football financial expert, a guru on the subject. He is a Manchester City fan, but he's a man who follows the facts. He follows the trail of numbers, an honourable man who does follow the facts, and you can't really avoid numbers. They're black and white, aren't they? Very simple. It doesn't go down the speculation route, and very much a man of honour, which is why I think City fans should absolutely follow this man. And even if you're Nottingham Forest, Everton, Newcastle, and what looks to be now, because United are getting embroiled in all of the same sort of problematic consequences of financial changes and stipulations and circumventing and cheating, accusations at least. Let's have a look. But go and follow Stefan Borson. But let's have a look at what Stefan Borson said on TalkSport. Here he is. But before I get going, I just want to point out the irony, the beautiful, beautiful irony of Stefan Borson sat there next to Troy Deeney on his phone, twiddling his thumbs, first of all, not even listening, which kind of encapsulates the average football fan for me. You know, he's probably not even listening. Like, he doesn't have a clue what's going on. But the irony of the fact that we're talking about the red cartel, and slapped across his t-shirt is the image of Pablo Escobar and the Narcos show on Netflix. What a show that is. Plato or plomo. Silver or lead, for those who needed that translating. Good show. Go and watch it. But the irony that he sat there with a cartel t-shirt on while Stefan Borson is exposing the red cartel. Mwah. It's perfect. It's poetry. Visual poetry. I love it. Absolutely brilliant. Let's have a listen to what Stefan Borson had to say.
Briefly, were Manchester United sailing close to the wind on profit and sustainability?
United is very interesting because we do have quite a lot of information about United because, of course, they quarterly report in the US, and so we know that they've told us that the end of year results will have a £660 million top line and about 140 million EBITDA.
EBITDA, for anyone wondering, is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation and amortisation. For the financial experts out there, they'll be like, oh, we know, Johnny, we know.
Which also tells us certain things about their costs. Now, bottom line is, when you drag that down on the 3-year assessment, United would have failed PSR for the season just gone, save for two things. One is they were given, it appears, an exceptional allowance of £40 million for COVID in 2022, which no other club had.
So how'd they get that?
The most any other club had was about £1 million in that period.
So how'd they get 40?
We don't know.
Just let that sink in for a bit. Manchester United were given £40 million allowances for COVID losses during the period of 21-22. £40 million, okay, and you're thinking, okay, what's the problem? But when the next best allowance was £1 million for the rest of the Premier League, don't talk to me about there isn't any corruption in this league. It's bent. It's as bent as a bent bar could possibly be. I don't know how to, I'm trying to think of a bent analogy. I couldn't come up with one. But what's the most bent thing you've ever seen in a U-bend in a toilet? That's the Premier League. Bent.
On top of that, it seems that they've been given allowance for around about £35 million of exceptional cost relating to the share sale to Ratcliffe, which, I mean, to be honest, the Glazers should have paid that themselves anyway, given that they were the main beneficiary. But we know from the numbers that was £35 million.
So another £35 million on top of the 40. So £75 million United have been given as an allowance for that year, with £35 million being given for the share sale towards Jim Ratcliffe. There's another £35 million plus the COVID allowance of £40 million, while the rest of the Premier League are allowed £1 million.
And the only way in which they can make the 23-24 PSR number, and this is not just my view, this is the view of multiple people who run the numbers based on publicly available information from the US. The only way they could have made that PSR target was by having these allowances, which are relatively exceptional in the game. So I think around the table at the Premier League, when you've got Newcastle having to scurry around on the 29th and 30th of June to sell players, and then they discover that actually United have had what appear to be quite exceptional allowances, and where you've had a season where Everton have all of their troubles and continue to have them
Questions
with
need to be asked.
the capitalisation issue that's still upcoming in the current season, in the forthcoming season. And Nottingham Forest, of course, who weren't allowed to count promotion bonuses. All these things that weren't allowed, and yet United have been given allowances for COVID and for probably for exceptional costs on the share sale. There will be questions asked around the table.
I mean, that's mind-blowing stuff, really. That is absolutely mind-blowing, kaboom stuff. Like, what the... Honestly, we're the cheats, apparently. How do you explain your way around that? Okay, so why have Manchester United been given a £40 million allowance for the COVID losses? Forget the share sale, because it sounds like a unique circumstance because they were in the middle of a sale. I'm not sure why that happened either, to be honest, why 35 million was allowed to be counted as a loss in that term as well. £40 million. Now, we all had that. The reason why people are drawn to that figure, because we all suffered from COVID, didn't we? We're all in the same boat as that regard. That was a worldwide thing that we're all well aware of. Why were United given a £40 million allowance, yet the rest of the Premier League, the best they got was close to £1 million? A £39 million difference between United and the rest. Don't tell me there's not favouritism going on out there. So, running to the defence of Manchester United was Kieran Maguire, another football finance expert who recently spoke on Twitter. And he posted, "I've been asked by a few people to investigate £40 million COVID allowance that Man United have in the 2021-22 accounts. Have spoken to senior sources at club and elsewhere," so he went straight to United, first of all, to ask, what's going on here, United? Can you tell us what's going on? Oh, let us tell you. We'll tell you the truth. We're Man United. You're Man United and you'll do as you're told. The reasons are, 1, cancellation of summer tour in 2021. Okay, straight away, can I just highlight for the fact that Manchester City also had to cancel their tour in the US for the exact same reasons. The exact same losses Manchester City will have lost. For the same reasons. Point 1, put that in the bin. 2, bad debts caused by commercial partner insolvency. 3, club unable to fulfil sponsorship partner obligations in summer 2021. 4, broadcaster rebates, Premier League and UEFA, because MUFC are listed in New York. They have to disclose more information than other clubs, many of whom have COVID claims but are not shown in accounts. Conclusion, no corruption from the Premier League. Well, that's straight away. I've already highlighted. The first point he wanted to make was the cancellation of the summer tour in 2021. Now, the idea that the bad debts caused by commercial partner insolvency and the club is unable to fulfil sponsorship partner obligations, absolute bollocks, because Everton were fighting this cause. So this isn't a City case now. I'm fighting the cause for Everton in their particular, having points docked last season. So United avoided PSR. They should have been docked points. And the difference between being docked points and not being docked points just happened to be this perfect amount of money that Manchester United have been given an allowance by the Premier League. Okay? Whereas Everton, they were docked points. And then they fought the case, and the Premier League submitted, in their response to the appeal, the Premier League submitted that Everton was not entitled to any mitigation because such suspension was fundamentally ordinary. Does someone want to tell me what's ordinary about COVID? Because that's the losses they were reporting. That they wanted the same treatment. They wanted to be afforded these losses, but they weren't. And they were docked points and nearly relegated. Put another way, the loss of a sponsor was was an event in the ordinary course of a club's trading and should have been taken into account as a normal operating risk. In this regard, as summarised above, the Premier League put to Everton's witnesses that the loss of a sponsor is an event which may befall any club, and that Everton had exceeded the upper loss threshold due to imprudent financial planning. The Premier League further argued that point 1 is to do with the Ukraine situation. Point 2, sponsors were regularly lost, including in unexpected or unforeseeable circumstances. What was foreseeable about COVID? Yeah, everyone saw that one coming, didn't they? All business, we all knew that was on the horizon, didn't we? Fucking hell. The Premier League referred to A, examples in which either clubs or their sponsors terminated sponsorship agreements at short notice, and B, the bans imposed on tobacco and gambling sponsors, which is a subject for another day, which is going to be a growing problem and could be well linked to why Manchester City and the rest of the Premier League are not spending money because of these gambling sponsors not being on the front of shirts, and you've got clubs out there that are struggling to find sponsorship deals now. But sticking with the subject and the problem, we can't forget some of the bollocks that Kieran Maguire seems to have come out with here. I don't know why he's so valiantly defending Manchester United, but he's not the first to do it. Let's have it right as well, because we reported, this was a Mark Ogden on the ESPN. Mark Ogden, reporter, a United fan, need to highlight, and I think his intention at the start of this article when he started to write it, with the headline being Manchester City have lost 126 million due to COVID-19 pandemic. I think the point he was trying to make was trying to stick the knife in City a little bit and how City is suffering. That's the point he's made there. But what he's done without realising it is he's highlighted that Manchester City made very similar losses to Manchester United, yet apparently they're allowed £39 million more than we are as an allowance during the COVID-19. Can somebody explain to me how this is fair? I've heard numbskulls try and explain, well, it's our stadium. We've got a bigger stadium, 72,000. You know, you've got Spurs, West Ham, 62,000. Arsenal, 60,000. City, 55,000. Growing as well, expanding. You know, the difference between Arsenal Stadium and United Stadium and Spurs' Stadium, the biggest stadiums in the Premier League, the gap between United and the second best, third, fourth and fifth, it's not £40 million. It's not that. Don't talk shit. Absolute bollocks. I've never heard so much bollocks in all my life, to put it in plain terms. I'm absolutely bemused and baffled as to why this isn't mainstream news. And to me, highlights why Manchester United were one of the few to refuse and oppose the idea of an independent Premier League regulator. An independent Premier League regulator which Manchester City voted for. So while we're being accused of cheating with 115 charges, we're trying to bring in an independent regulator and voting, yes, please, bring in the independent regulator, who will no doubt attack the 115 charges, while in the same breath they will also attack things like this, favouritism being clearly shown to Manchester United and very much against your likes of Everton and Nottingham Forest. Newcastle had to sell a lot of their top talent to get around this PSR. They had to sell their best players, some of their best players, to get around it. It's an absolute joke, and this for me has absolutely blown the lid off the corruption that is surrounding the Premier League. Blues and general fans, get in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts on this one. Like and subscribe to Typical City, and I'll see you in the next one.
This is Typical City now, holding up silverware.